The blizzard had teeth. Annie Porter learned this as she ran through the darkness, her bare feet leaving bloody prints in the fresh snow. Each breath burned. Each step felt like the mountain itself was trying to drag her back to hell. Behind her, 3 men moved like wolves. Their lanterns swung through the white curtain of falling snow, painting shadows that stretched and twisted across the frozen ground. She could hear Virgil Kane's voice cutting through the wind, calm and certain like a preacher calling home a lost lamb. "End of the line, girl!" Annie's legs gave out. She collapsed into a drift, the cold embracing her like an old friend. Maybe this was better. Maybe freezing was kinder than what waited back at that house. She closed her eyes and waited for the gunshot. It came, but the sound was wrong. Not the crack of a rifle pointing at her skull. This was different, distant, sharp. The kind of sound that changed everything. Annie opened her eyes. Virgil Kane stood 10 feet away, staring at his empty hands. His rifle lay in the snow. The stock shattered smoke rising from the ruined metal. His men froze their own weapons, half raised, scanning the tree line with the sudden fear of prey animals who just realized they were being hunted. A figure emerged from the pines, tall, broad across the shoulders, moving with the kind of quiet that came from a life spent in wild places. His rifle was still smoking, held loose and easy in hands that knew exactly what they were doing. He wore buckskin and fur, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat crusted with ice. When he stepped into the circle of lantern light, his eyes caught the glow, cold, gray, ancient as the stones. Virgil found his voice first. "You know who I am, mountain man." The stranger's voice came low and rough like wind through a canyon. "I know what you are. Now walk away before I put the next bullet somewhere permanent." Annie watched the standoff from her knees in the snow. The stranger had not looked at her yet. His entire focus remained on Virgil and his men. Calculating, measuring. She recognized that look. She had seen it on the faces of the miners who worked the deep shafts, the ones who knew how to read a tunnel about to collapse. This man was reading death, and he was not afraid of what he saw. Virgil's 2 companions shifted their weight fingers, twitching near triggers. The stranger did not move, did not blink. The message was clear. "You can try, but I will kill at least 2 of you before you get me, maybe all 3. Annie saw the moment Virgil made his choice, saw the calculation in his eyes, the careful weighing of costs. A dead girl was one thing. A gunfight with a stranger who could shoot a rifle out of a man's hands in a blizzard was something else entirely. "You can run to the devil himself," Virgil said, his voice poison-sweet. "But I will find you. You are mine by law. Ward of the court, legal and proper." He turned and walked into the storm. His men followed their lanterns, disappearing into the white like dying stars. But Annie knew the truth. Virgil Kane never let go of anything that belonged to him. The stranger finally looked at her. He approached slowly, keeping his rifle pointed at the ground, his other hand raised where she could see it. When he knelt beside her, she flinched so hard she nearly fell over. He stopped, waited, let her see that he was not reaching for her. "I am not going to hurt you," he said. "Can you walk?" Annie tried to stand. Her legs would not obey. The cold had gone too deep. She shook her head. "All right, then." He scooped her up like she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. She wanted to fight, wanted to scream, but her body had used the last of its strength just to run this far. As he carried her into the trees, away from the place where Virgil's lanterns had disappeared, Annie felt something strange and terrible rising in her chest. Hope. She had forgotten what it felt like. The cabin appeared from the storm like something out of a dream. Small, solid, built from logs so thick they looked like they could stand against the end of the world. Smoke rose from a stone chimney, promising warmth. Real warmth, the kind that did not come with a price. Inside, everything was simple and clean. A single room, a bed in the corner, a table, 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies and books, a fireplace that filled half the wall flames dancing behind an iron grate. The stranger laid her on the bed and stepped back, giving her space. "Stay there," he said. "I will get you something warm." Annie watched him move to the fire. His hands shook when he picked up the kettle, just for a moment, just enough that she noticed. He caught her looking and stilled the tremor through sheer force of will. There was a story in that shake, a wound that never quite healed. He brought her tea, set it on the small table beside the bed. Then he pulled one of the chairs over and sat, keeping distance between them. He removed his hat. His face was weathered-lined deep by sun and wind and years. 40, maybe more. His hair was dark, shot through with gray, but it was his eyes that held her, gray as winter sky, sad in a way that went all the way down to bone. "My name is Caleb," he said. "Caleb Stone. This is my cabin. You are safe here." Annie opened her mouth. No sound came out. She tried again. Nothing. The words were there, trapped behind a wall she could not break. Panic rose in her chest. She clawed at her throat like she could pull the voice out by force. Caleb stood crossed to a shelf and returned with paper and a pencil. He set them beside the tea. "Some wounds take time," he said quietly. "No rush." Annie grabbed the pencil like a lifeline. Her hand shook so badly the first word came out almost illegible, but she managed. "Why did you help me?" Caleb was silent for a long time. He stared into the fire, and Annie saw his jaw work, grinding down on something too heavy for words. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because no one helped my son when he needed it." Annie wrote again, slower this time. "Your son, he is dead, 10 years now." She wanted to ask more, wanted to understand this man who had appeared from nowhere and killed her hope of dying in the snow. But exhaustion was a wave crashing over her, dragging her down into darkness. The last thing she saw before sleep took her was Caleb still sitting in his chair, staring at the fire like it held answers to questions he could not bring himself to ask. Morning came hard and bright. Annie woke to sunlight streaming through a window, clean and merciless. For a moment she forgot where she was, forgot that she had run, forgot that someone had saved her. Then memory crashed back and she bolted upright, heart-hammering. Caleb sat at the table carving something from a piece of wood. His hands moved with steady precision, shaping the raw material into something that looked almost like a bird. He glanced up when she moved, but did not speak, just nodded once, acknowledging that she was awake, and returned to his work. Annie looked down at herself. Someone had bandaged her feet, had covered her with clean blankets, had placed a glass of water within reach. Small kindnesses, the kind that hurt worse than cruelty, because they reminded her that the world could be different than the one Virgil had built for her. She reached for the paper. "How long was I asleep?" Caleb set down his knife. 14 hours. You needed it." "Are you going to send me back?" "No." The simplicity of it broke something in her chest. No conditions, no demands, no prices to be paid. Just no. She wrote again, her hand steadier now. "What happens when he comes for me?" "I expect he will," Caleb said. "Man like that does not let go easy, but he will have to go through me first." The sound of hooves brought them both to their feet. Caleb crossed to the window, moving with the kind of silence that came from long practice. Annie watched him peer through the gap in the shutters, saw his jaw tighten. "Deputy," he said. "Alone." He opened the door before the rider could knock. The man who dismounted was young, 25, maybe 26. He wore a badge on his coat and carried himself with the careful posture of someone who had learned that authority was fragile. When he removed his hat, Annie saw a face that was trying hard to be stern and failing. There was too much conflict in his eyes, too much doubt. "Mr. Stone," the deputy said, "I need to talk to you about the girl." "Talk then." The deputy glanced past Caleb to where Annie stood by the table. Something flickered across his face. Recognition. Guilt. "My uncle filed abduction charges. Says you stole his ward. His legal ward." "Legal," Caleb repeated, tasting the word like it was rotten. That man was hunting her through a blizzard like an animal. "I know how it looked," the deputy said, and there was real pain in his voice. "But the law is the law. He is her guardian, court appointed after her parents died in the mine collapse last year." "What court?" "Judge Ridley. And I suppose Judge Ridley is a friend of your uncle's." The deputy flinched. "Mr. Stone, I am not here to arrest you. Not yet. But there is going to be a hearing. 3 days from now. Judge Ridley will decide custody. And I need to tell you my uncle has lawyers, good ones. You take this girl, you're making an enemy you cannot beat." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had dropped to something cold and final. "I have lived with worse enemies than men." The deputy looked at him, really looked, and Annie saw understanding dawn. This was not a man who could be threatened. This was someone who had already lost everything that mattered. What could Virgil take from someone who had nothing left to lose? 3 days, the deputy said again. But he was not looking at Caleb anymore. He was looking at Annie. "I am sorry. I am so sorry for all of it." He mounted his horse and rode away without another word. Caleb closed the door, stood there with his hand on the wood head, bowed. Annie watched his shoulders rise and fall with a breath that seemed to carry the weight of mountains. Then he turned and looked at her with those gray, sad eyes. "You should know who that was," he said. "Deputy Jesse Kane, Virgil's nephew." Annie felt the floor drop out from under her. Jesse. She remembered him from the house. The young man who had looked away when Virgil raged, who had brought her extra food when no one was watching, who had never met her eyes because to see her was to know what was happening, and to know was to be complicit. Jesse Kane was caught between blood and conscience. And Annie knew from hard experience that blood almost always won. That night the nightmares came. Annie dreamed of the house, of Virgil's voice smooth as oil, of hands that left bruises shaped like fingers, of the other girls who had come and gone, disappearing like smoke. In her dream she tried to scream, tried to warn them, but no sound would come. She woke fighting. Caleb was there holding her wrists, keeping her from hurting herself. His grip was firm but careful, and his voice cut through the panic like a knife through fog. "You are safe. You're in the cabin. He is not here." Annie thrashed, not seeing him, seeing only Virgil's face, feeling only terror. "Annie," Caleb said louder now. "Look at me. Look." She focused on his eyes, gray, steady, anchoring her to this moment, this place, this reality where Virgil could not reach her. Slowly, the panic receded. She stopped fighting. Caleb released her wrists and stepped back, giving her space to breathe. He sat on the floor deliberately, making himself smaller, less threatening. "You are all right," he said. "It was a dream, just a dream." Annie reached for the paper with shaking hands. "I am sorry." "Do not be. It keeps happening. The nightmares." "I know. I have them too." She looked at him, saw the truth of it in the lines around his eyes, the permanent weariness that came from years of broken sleep. She wrote again. "What do you dream about?" Caleb was silent for so long she thought he would not answer. When he did, his voice was barely audible. "A boy, 12 years old. He was holding a doll. I thought it was a gun." Annie understood then, the shake in his hands, the sorrow that lived in him like a second soul. This man had killed a child, had carried that weight for years, had come to the mountains to bury himself with his guilt. She wrote slowly, carefully, "You saved me. That matters." "Does it?" He looked at her with such raw pain that she had to look away. "One child saved does not bring back the one I killed. It does not make me innocent." Annie picked up the pencil again. Her hand was steadier now. She knew what she needed to say, knew it with the same certainty that had driven her to run into a blizzard rather than spend another night in Virgil's house. "Virgil did not just hurt me. There were others, girls who came to his house and never left. He sells them, to mines, to brothels, to anyone who pays." Caleb read the words. Read them again. His face went very still. How many? I counted at least 7 in the ledger, maybe more. I stopped looking because I couldn't bear to see their names, but I think there are more. Ledger. He keeps records, names, prices, where they went. Where is this ledger? His office. Above the trading post. Caleb stood, walked to the window, stared out at the moonlit snow. When he turned back, something had changed in his face. The sorrow was still there, but underneath it, Annie saw something else, something hard and sharp and utterly without mercy. Not any more, he said. Morning brought a confession. They sat at the table, the wood between them worn smooth by years of use. Caleb poured coffee for himself, tea for Annie. His hands were steady now, purposeful. He had made a decision in the night, and Annie could see it in the set of his shoulders. The guilt was still there, would always be there. But he had found something stronger. He began to speak. I fought in the war, he said. Union Army. We were pushing through Virginia, clearing houses. There was a raid. I kicked in a door, saw movement, something in the shadows. I fired. He stopped, swallowed hard, continued. It was a boy, maybe 12. He was holding his sister's doll, just a doll. But in the dark, with the smoke and the fear, I thought I saw a weapon. I killed him, shot him in the chest. He died looking at me, confused, like he could not understand why I had done this terrible thing. Annie wrote, It was war. You did not know. That does not make him less dead. Caleb's voice was flat, final. I came home after that, tried to forget, met a woman, Miriam. She saw something in me worth saving. We married, had a son, Samuel. His hand tightened around the coffee cup. They died 10 years ago. Diphtheria, the doctor said. First Miriam, then Samuel 2 days later. I buried them both in the same week. And when they were in the ground, I walked away. Came to these mountains, built this cabin, told myself I was better off alone, that I did not deserve another chance. He looked at her then, really looked, and Annie saw the truth he was offering her. I came here to disappear, he said, because of things I did, things I cannot take back. But hiding did not make me innocent. It just made me a coward. Annie wrote carefully, You saved me. That is not coward. I saved you because I could not save him, that boy, or my own son. Maybe this is my chance to do something right. Maybe it is just selfishness. I do not know, but I know this. He leaned forward. You said Virgil keeps a ledger, names of girls he sold. If we get that ledger, we can prove what he is. We can stop him from hurting anyone else, but it is dangerous. He will kill to protect that secret. I need you to understand the risk. Annie did not hesitate. She wrote 3 words. I want to help. Caleb shook his head. You do not have to. I can do this alone. She wrote again, pressing hard enough that the pencil nearly tore the paper. I know where he hides things. You do not. I need to do this. They looked at each other across the table. 2 people broken by the same kind of evil. 2 people who had forgotten what it felt like to fight back. Slowly, Caleb nodded. All right then, tonight. We go together. The plan was simple. Caleb would create a distraction in town, a fight, something loud enough to draw Virgil and his men away from the trading post. Annie would slip inside, find the ledger, and get out. Simple, quick, clean. But as they rode toward Silver Ridge under cover of darkness, Annie felt her courage starting to crack. She had not been back to town since the night she ran, had not seen the trading post or the house behind it, had not smelled the particular combination of tobacco and whiskey that clung to Virgil like a second skin. Caleb seemed to sense her fear. He rode close to their horses, nearly touching. You do not have to do this, he said again. Say the word, and we turn around. Annie shook her head, pulled out the paper she had tucked into her coat. On it, she had written 1 word, please. They reached town just after midnight. Silver Ridge was small. 24 buildings clustered around a main street that turned to mud whenever it rained and froze solid in winter. The trading post sat at the north end, a two-story structure with living quarters above and Virgil's office in the back. Light glowed in several windows. Men's voices drifted through the night, rough with drink and cards. Caleb dismounted at the saloon across the street. "Give me 10 minutes," he said. "When you hear the commotion, move fast. In and out. I will meet you back at the horses." Annie nodded, watched him walk into the saloon like a man with nothing to lose, because that was exactly what he was. She waited, counted her heartbeats. Then it started, the crash of furniture, shouts, someone screaming about a cheat at cards, the unmistakable sound of fists hitting flesh. Virgil's voice, sharp with command, ordering his men to break it up. Footsteps pounding toward the saloon. Annie moved. She slipped through the back door of the trading post, the one that was never locked, because Virgil believed no one in town would dare rob him. The stairs creaked under her weight, each sound impossibly loud in her ears. She reached the second floor, found the office. The ledger was where it always was, in the bottom drawer of the desk, hidden beneath a false bottom. Annie's hands knew the trick. She had cleaned this office 100 times, had memorized every secret. She pulled out the book. It was heavier than she remembered, leather-bound, expensive. The kind of ledger a successful merchant might keep to track inventory, but this inventory was human. Annie opened it, page after page of names, girls' names, ages, physical descriptions, and beside each name a number. $50, $75, $100, the price of a life. She found her own name, Annie Porter, age 15, reserved for special placement, not yet sold. Her hands started to shake. She flipped backward. Older entries, more names, more prices. And then she found it. M. Stone, age 31, silenced, $100. The date was 10 years ago. Annie's breath caught. M. Stone, Miriam Stone, Caleb's wife. The flashback hit her like a physical blow. She was 7 years old again, hiding in the cupboard in Virgil's kitchen because that was where children were supposed to be when adults were talking. A woman had come to the house, tall, dark-haired, pretty in a way that made Virgil's smile turn sharp. "I know what you are doing," the woman said. Her voice was clear, unafraid. "I have seen the girls, I have asked questions, and I am going to tell the marshal." Virgil's voice stayed calm. "Mrs. Stone, Miriam, let us talk about this like reasonable people." "There is nothing to talk about. You are selling children. That is not business. That is evil." "Evil is a strong word. So is murder, which is what you will hang for when I am done." Silence. Then Virgil's voice, softer now, gentle. "I am sorry you feel that way, truly. But I cannot let you leave here with those thoughts in your head." Young Annie had peeked through the crack in the cupboard door, saw Virgil pour tea, saw Miriam drink it, still arguing, still brave, saw her face change 20 minutes later. Confusion, then pain, then nothing. She watched Virgil carry the body out into the night. The memory released her. Annie stood in the office holding the proof in her hands. Caleb's wife had not died of diphtheria. She had been murdered, poisoned, because she tried to stop Virgil from doing to other children what he was now doing to Annie. Footsteps on the stairs. Annie's heart stopped. The door opened. Virgil Kane stood in the doorway, and his smile was the most terrifying thing she had ever seen. "Well, well," he said. The little bird came back to the cage. Annie backed toward the window. The ledger clutched to her chest. Her voice tried to work, failed. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Virgil stepped into the room, closed the door behind him. "My ledger, my life's work, all those ungrateful girls I saved from the streets." He was between her and the only exit. "Still cannot talk." Virgil's voice dripped false concern. "That is all right. Silence is a virtue, especially in women, especially in girls who know too much." He reached for her. The window exploded. Glass sprayed inward as Caleb swung through on a rope, his boots connecting with Virgil's chest. The two men went down in a tangle of limbs. Caleb rolled to his feet first, putting himself between Annie and Virgil. "Get out," he said to her. "Now!" But Annie could not move, could not look away. This was it, the moment. Virgil and Caleb circling each other like wolves. Two men who had both taken pieces of her life, one to hurt, one to heal. Virgil lunged. Caleb met him with a punch that snapped the older man's head back. They crashed into the desk. Virgil grabbed a letter opener, slashed wildly. The blade caught Caleb's arm, drawing blood. Caleb did not slow. He grabbed Virgil's wrist, twisted hard, and the improvised weapon clattered to the floor. He had Virgil pinned when the door burst open again. Jesse Kane stood there, gun drawn, the barrel shaking. "Let him go," he said. I cannot let you kill him." Caleb froze. He looked at Jesse, looked at the gun, calculated odds, and found them wanting. "He murdered my wife," Caleb said, his voice raw. 10 years ago, poisoned her because she tried to stop him from selling children." "I know," Jesse said, and there were tears on his face. "I know, but he is my uncle. He raised me after my parents died. I owe him everything. You owe him nothing." But Caleb stayed where he was, hands on Virgil's throat, one squeeze away from ending it. "He is a monster. He is family." Virgil smiled through bloodied teeth. "Good boy, Jesse. Now, arrest this man for assault and attempted murder." The standoff held. Then Annie spoke. The sound that came from her throat was broken, cracked, raw from disuse. But it was a voice. Her voice, fighting its way out after a year of silence. "He killed my mother." Everyone froze. Annie stepped forward, the ledger still clutched in her hands. Her voice grew stronger with each word, like a muscle remembering how to work. "I watched him. I was 7. She came to his house to report him. He poisoned her tea. I saw him bury her body in the woods behind the trading post." Jesse's gun lowered an inch. "What? The girl is delusional," Virgil snarled. "Trauma does that to weak minds." "I can show you where," Annie continued. Her voice was shaking but clear. "I remember. I have always remembered. I just could not say it out loud." She held up the ledger. "It is all here. Every girl, every price, including your Aunt Clara." Jesse went white. "Aunt Clara died in childbirth 5 years ago. Did she?" Annie opened the ledger, found the page, turned it toward Jesse. "C. Kane, age 28. Eliminated along with infant. Threat to operation." Jesse stared at the entry, at his uncle's handwriting, at the casual documentation of his aunt's murder. The gun trembled in his hand. "Uncle Virgil," he said, his voice breaking, "tell me she is lying. Please, tell me this is not real." Virgil's mask finally cracked. "She is merchandise, Jesse, just like you were. I saved you from the streets when your parents died, gave you a home, a future. You owe me your life." "Oh God." Jesse's gun sagged toward the floor. "It is all true. Everything they said about you. It is all true." Virgil tried to twist free. Caleb held him fast. Jesse looked at Caleb, at Annie, at the ledger that contained the proof of 10 years of horror, at his uncle, the man who had raised him, the man who had murdered his aunt and her baby and called it business. The gun came back up, but now it was pointed at Virgil. "Go," Jesse said to Caleb and Annie. "Take the ledger. Run. I will give you a head start." "You will hang for this, boy," Virgil spat. "Maybe." Jesse's voice was steady now, certain. "But at least I will hang clean." Caleb released Virgil and grabbed Annie's hand. They ran. Behind them, they heard Jesse reading Virgil his rights, heard the clink of handcuffs, heard Virgil screaming threats and promises of vengeance. They made it to the horses. Caleb boosted Annie into the saddle and swung up behind her, and they rode hard for the mountains. Behind them, Silver Ridge erupted into chaos. Shouts, gunfire, the whole rotten structure starting to collapse. Annie held the ledger against her chest and felt something impossible blooming in her heart. Hope. Real hope. The kind that came from fighting back. They were miles away when the adrenaline finally wore off, and Annie started to shake. Caleb pulled the horse to a stop in a stand of pines, dismounted, and lifted her down. She collapsed against him, and he held her while she cried. Great racking sobs that tore free from somewhere deep and wounded. "You spoke," he said quietly. "You found your voice." Annie pulled back, wiping her eyes. When she spoke now, the words came easier. Still rough, still hesitant, but real. "I had to, for all of them, all the girls. You were so brave. I was terrified." "Bravery is not the absence of fear," Caleb said. "It is doing what needs to be done despite the fear. And you did that. You testified against him. You saved Jesse from making a terrible mistake." "Will Jesse be all right?" "I do not know." Caleb looked back toward town, toward the orange glow of lanterns and torches. He made a choice tonight, to stand with what is right instead of what is easy. That takes courage, but courage has a cost. They remounted and rode through the rest of the night. By dawn they had reached the cabin. Caleb built up the fire, while Annie collapsed into bed exhaustion, claiming her before her head hit the pillow. He sat in his chair and watched her sleep. This broken girl who had found her voice. This child who was not his daughter but might as well be. He opened the ledger and read through the entries by firelight. 11 girls, 11 lives stolen and sold, and in the middle of it all, Miriam's name. Proof that his wife had been murdered, trying to save children just like Annie. Caleb closed the book and stared into the flames. 10 years he had lived with the lie. 10 years of thinking Miriam died from disease. 10 years of guilt and isolation, and slowly drowning in his own sorrow. Now he knew the truth, and the truth was a knife in his gut. But it was also a gift, because now he knew what he had to do, not to bring back the dead, not to erase his own sins, but to honor Miriam's memory by finishing what she started. He would protect Annie. He would stop Virgil Kane, and he would make sure no other child disappeared into that ledger's pages. Outside, the sun rose over the mountains, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose. A new day, a new beginning. And for the first time in 10 years, Caleb Stone felt something he thought he had lost forever: purpose. The first morning in hiding, Annie woke to find Caleb standing at the window with his rifle watching the tree line, like he expected an army to pour through at any moment. She sat up slowly, her body aching from the previous night's escape. Her throat felt raw from speaking after so long, but the words were there now, waiting, ready. "Are they coming?" Her voice was still rough, each word an effort. Caleb did not turn. Yes, question is when. He was right. By noon they saw the first riders in the valley below, 6 men on horseback moving in a search pattern, spreading out, covering ground. Annie recognized the lead rider even from a distance, the way he sat, his horse straight-backed and certain. Virgil Kane did not give up what belonged to him. "We need to move," Caleb said. They packed light: food, blankets, ammunition. The ledger went into a waterproof pouch that Caleb strapped to his chest. Everything else they could replace. But that book was worth more than gold. It was proof, evidence, justice waiting to be served. Annie watched him work. His movements were efficient, economical, no wasted motion. This was a man who had lived alone for a long time, who had learned to carry only what mattered. "Where will we go?" she asked. "Higher, deeper, places those men will not want to follow." He looked at her. "It will be hard, cold. We will be sleeping on stone and eating whatever we can hunt." "Can you do that?" Annie thought about the alternative, going back to Virgil's house, to the locked room and the men who visited, and the slow death of hope. Yes. Good girl. They left through the back, moving into the high country where the snow lay deep and permanent. Behind them, Virgil's men reached the cabin within an hour. Annie heard the distant sound of breaking wood. They were tearing the place apart, looking for the ledger. Let them look. The first day was the hardest. Annie's feet, still healing from her barefoot run through the blizzard, screamed with every step. But she did not complain, did not ask to stop. because stopping meant being caught, and being caught meant Virgil would win. Caleb set a brutal pace, pushing higher into the mountains where the air grew thin and the wind cut like knives. But every few hours he would find shelter, a cave, an overhang, a stand of thick pines that blocked the worst of the wind. He would build a small fire invisible from below and brew tea from pine needles. "Drink," he said, handing her the tin cup. "Keeps the cold sickness away." Annie drank. The tea was bitter but warm. She watched Caleb over the rim of the cup. He had not slept. She knew because she had been watching him through the night. Every sound brought his hand to his rifle. Every shift in the wind made him tense. "You need to rest," she said. "I will rest when we are safe." Are we ever going to be safe? The question hung in the cold air between them. Caleb stared into the small fire. "I do not know. Men like Virgil Cain, they do not stop. They do not forgive. He will hunt us until he dies, or we do. Then we make sure he is the one who dies." Caleb looked at her sharply. "That is not your burden to carry. He killed my mother. He killed your wife. He sold 11 girls like they were cattle." Annie's voice grew stronger with each sentence. "How is that not my burden?" "Because you are 15 years old. I stopped being a child the day my mother died." The truth of it hit Caleb like a physical blow. She was right. This girl had been forced to grow up too fast, had seen too much, had survived things that would break grown men. He had no right to treat her like she was fragile. "All right," he said quietly. "Then we do this together, partners." Annie felt something warm bloom in her chest. Not quite trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. That night the wolves came, not real wolves, Virgil's men, moving through the darkness with torches calling out promises of mercy and threats of violence in equal measure. They were close, too close. Caleb doused the fire, pulled Annie deeper into the cave they had sheltered in, put a finger to his lips. "Wait." They sat in absolute darkness, listening to the men search, listening to them curse the cold and the mountains and the stubborn fool who thought he could hide from Virgil Cain forever. "They cannot have gone far," one voice said. "Girl's hurt. She will slow him down." "Maybe she died," another suggested. "Maybe he is carrying a corpse." Laughter, cruel and casual. Annie felt Caleb's hand find hers in the dark. His palm was rough with calluses, warm despite the cold. He squeezed once. "I am here. You are not alone." The men moved on, but they did not leave the area. They made camp half a mile down the slope, building a fire that blazed like a beacon, making it clear they were not going anywhere. Caleb waited until the sounds of their camp settled into routine. Then he leaned close to Annie, his breath warm against her ear. "Stay here. Do not move. Do not make a sound. I will be back before dawn." "Where are you going?" "To even the odds." Before she could protest, he was gone, moving into the darkness like a ghost. Annie sat alone in the cave and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Caleb moved through the night with the practiced silence of a man who had hunted and been hunted. The war had taught him many things, most of them terrible. But some were useful, like how to approach an enemy camp without being seen, like how to identify the sentries and their patterns, like how to use fear as a weapon. He circled the camp, counted men, 6 as he had thought, all armed, all dangerous, but also cold and tired and far from home, men who had expected an easy hunt, men who were discovering that the mountains did not care about expectations. Caleb picked up a stone, threw it hard into the brush on the far side of camp. 2 men grabbed rifles and went to investigate. While they were gone, Caleb slipped in close to the horses, found the saddlebags, took half the ammunition, all the salt pork, most of the coffee, small thefts, the kind that would not be noticed until morning, the kind that would make the next few days significantly harder for men who were already questioning why they had agreed to chase a mountain man through hell itself. He was almost clear when he saw it. A leather satchel hanging from one of the saddles, expensive, well-made, the kind of thing a rich man would carry, the kind of thing Virgil Cain would carry. Caleb opened it. Inside papers, legal documents, and a letter sealed with wax addressed to Judge Amos Ridley. Caleb broke the seal and read by moonlight. The letter was a promise. Virgil would pay the judge $5,000 to rule in his favor at the custody hearing, to declare Annie his legal ward, to order her return to his guardianship, and if Caleb Stone resisted, to issue a warrant for his arrest. Murder, kidnapping, whatever charges were necessary to put him in a noose. Caleb felt rage cold and clean wash through him. This was the system. This was justice in Silver Ridge. Money and corruption and good men looking the other way because it was easier than fighting. He took the letter, left everything else, and disappeared back into the night. When he returned to the cave, Annie was exactly where he had left her, awake, alert, the small knife he had given her clutched in her hand like a prayer. She lowered it when she saw him. "You came back." "I said I would. People say a lot of things." Caleb sat beside her and showed her the letter, watched her read it by the light of a match, watched her face go hard. "He is going to win," she said, "even if we run forever, even if we get the ledger to honest people. He has already bought the judge." "Maybe, but judges can be unbought if the price is right." "What price?" "The truth, loud enough that ignoring it becomes more expensive than acknowledging it." Annie looked at him. "You have a plan." "The beginning of one." He told her about Marshal Roy Dalton, a federal lawman based out of Denver, a man with a reputation for going after corruption no matter where it led. Caleb had met him once years ago when Dalton was still a deputy and Caleb was still someone who believed in the law. "If we can get the ledger to him," Caleb said, "if we can show him proof of what Virgil has done, he will have to investigate, and a federal investigation supersedes a local judge." "That is a lot of ifs." "It is all we have." Annie was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke, her voice small in the darkness. "Tell me about your wife, about Miriam." The question caught Caleb off guard, but maybe this was what they both needed, to remember the people they had lost, to give the dead a voice in the darkness. "She was fierce," he said finally, "small, maybe 5 feet tall, but when she made up her mind about something, armies could not change it." He stared at the cave wall, but he was seeing something else, someone else. "We met after the war. I was trying to drink myself to death. Slow suicide by whiskey. She walked into the saloon where I was wasting away and sat down across from me. Just sat. Did not say anything. When I asked what she wanted, she said, 'You look like a man who needs saving.' I told her I was past saving. She said, 'Good thing I do not listen to fools then.'" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "She made me want to be better, made me believe I could be. We built the cabin together, married on a Tuesday in October with nothing but the trees as witnesses, had Samuel 9 months later. For 3 years I thought I had escaped my past, thought I could be just a husband, just a father, just a man." His voice broke. "Then she got sick. That is what the doctor said. Diphtheria. I believed him because I needed to believe, because the alternative was that I had failed to protect her, that I had let her die while I stood by, helpless." He looked at Annie, but she was not sick. She was poisoned, murdered by Virgil Kane for trying to do what was right. And I spent 10 years hating myself for not saving her when the truth was I never had the chance. He killed her before I even knew she was in danger. "You could not have known," Annie said. "That does not make her less dead." They sat in silence, 2 people carrying the weight of the dead, 2 people learning that sometimes the only way to honor the lost was to keep fighting for the living. "She would have liked you," Caleb said finally. "Miriam. She always wanted a daughter." Annie felt tears on her cheeks. "I think I would have liked her too." Dawn came gray and cold. The men in the valley broke camp and continued their search, but they were moving slower now, uncertain. The mountains had a way of breaking certainty. Caleb and Annie moved parallel to them, staying high using the terrain. They were 2 days into the wilderness when they heard the gunshot, not aimed at them. A signal shot, someone calling for help. Caleb froze, listened. The shot came again. Then voices, distant but clear in the thin air. "We need to investigate," he said. "Why, it could be a trap. It could be someone who needs help." Annie wanted to argue, wanted to say that their survival mattered more than strangers. But she saw the look in Caleb's eyes and knew this was not about logic. This was about the kind of man he was trying to be, the kind who did not walk away from people in trouble. They found Jesse Kane 2 hours later. He was slumped against a boulder, his leg twisted at a wrong angle. His horse stood nearby, reins trailing, looking guilty. When Jesse saw them approach, he tried to draw his gun. Failed. His face was gray with pain. "Easy," Caleb said. "We are not here to hurt you." "You should run," Jesse gasped. "My uncle. He is coming. He has men. We know. We have been watching them." Annie knelt beside Jesse, looked at his leg, saw the bone pressing against skin, broken badly. "This needs setting." "Leave me," Jesse said. "I deserve it. All those years I knew what he was doing, and I did nothing. You helped us escape. Too little. Too late." Caleb examined the leg. "This is going to hurt. A lot. Bite down on this." He handed Jesse a leather strap. What followed was brutal and necessary. The sound of bone grinding back into place, Jesse's muffled screams, Annie holding him down, while Caleb worked with steady, merciless precision. When it was done, Jesse was pale and shaking, but the leg was straight. Caleb splinted it with branches and rope. "That will hold if you do not move much." "Why are you helping me?" Jesse asked. "I am Virgil's family. I wore his badge. I looked the other way." "Because you chose differently when it mattered," Annie said quietly. "You could have shot Caleb. You did not. You let us go. That counts for something." Jesse looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "I found her, my Aunt Clara, where you said. I dug in those woods for 6 hours, found her bones, and a tiny skeleton beside her." His voice broke. "He killed them both. His own wife, his own child. I confronted him before he sent us after you, asked him to tell me it was a lie. You know what he said?" "They waited. He said she was going to report me. I did what was necessary, like it was nothing, like murder was just good business." Jesse laughed bitterly. "I have been making excuses for him my whole life. He saved me. He raised me. He gave me a future. But the truth is, he saw a scared orphan and thought, here is someone I can use, someone I can control." "You are not him," Caleb said. "You proved that." "Did I? Because I still love him. Part of me still wants to believe there is good in him somewhere. How sick is that? That is called being human." Caleb stood. "But we cannot take you with us. You will slow us down." "I know." Jesse reached into his coat, pulled out folded papers. "But I can give you this. I made copies of the ledger pages. And I wrote down everything I know, names, places, the whole network. There are 12 men in Colorado doing what my uncle does. Judges, sheriffs, businessmen. It is bigger than just him." He handed the papers to Caleb. "There is something else. My uncle is not just hunting you because of the girl. He is hunting you because you have evidence that connects him to Miriam Stone's death. If that gets out, if people know he murdered a woman for trying to expose him, his whole empire collapses. The men who work with him will turn on him to save themselves." Caleb studied the papers, names he recognized, men he had thought were honest. "How long have you known?" "Pieces of it for years, all of it for 2 days." Jesse met his eyes. "There is one more thing. A girl. Emma Crane. Dr. Crane's daughter. She was placed 5 years ago, Leadville. My uncle sold her to a brothel there. If you can find her, if she testifies, it is not just his word against yours. It is a pattern. Leadville is 80 miles from here. I know, but she is alive. I checked. And she might be the key to stopping all of this." Annie spoke. "I remember her. Emma. She gave me bread once, when Virgil was not watching." The memory was small, fragile. A tiny kindness in an ocean of cruelty, but it mattered. "We will find her," Annie said. Jesse nodded. "Take my horse, my badge. You might need both." He looked at Caleb. I am sorry for all of it. I know sorry does not fix anything, but I mean it. I know you do. Caleb helped him into a more sheltered position, left him water and food. When Virgil's men find you, tell them we went north. It will buy us time. I will tell them you went to hell, and that I hope you take my uncle with you. They left Jesse there and rode hard for Leadville. The journey took 3 days. They traveled by night, slept in shifts during the day, always moving. Jesse's badge got them past a patrol on the second day. His horse was strong and fast-bred for mountains. They made good time, but it was the conversations that mattered. As they rode, Annie asked questions about the war, about Caleb's son, about the weight of killing and the burden of survival. And Caleb, who had not talked to another human being about real things in 10 years, found himself answering. Samuel was 6 when he died, he said as they rested on the 3rd day. He had this laugh, like bells. He would laugh at anything, birds, rocks, the way shadows moved on walls. How did he die? Drowned during Miriam's funeral. I was not watching. I was too lost in grief to notice he had wandered away. They found him in the creek 2 hours later. He must have fallen in, must have called for help, but I was not there to hear. Annie reached across the space between them, took his hand. You cannot blame yourself for that. Why not? I was his father. Protecting him was my only job. You were grieving. You were human. You made a mistake. That mistake cost him his life. And hating yourself for 10 years brings him back. The question stopped him cold, because of course it did not. Of course his suffering changed nothing. Samuel was still dead. Miriam was still dead. And Caleb was still here, still breathing, still failing to honor their memory by actually living. No, he said quietly, it does not. Then maybe it is time to forgive yourself. I do not know how. Me neither. Annie's voice was soft. But maybe we figure it out together. They reached Leadville on the evening of the 3rd day. The town was larger than Silver Ridge, rougher, built on silver and sustained by greed. The streets were mud and ice, and men who looked at Annie like she was merchandise. Caleb kept her close. They found the boarding house Jesse had mentioned just after dark, a 3-story structure on the edge of town. Music and laughter spilled from the windows, the kind of laughter that had nothing to do with joy. I will go in, Caleb said. No, I will. Women can go places men cannot without questions. She was right. Caleb hated it, but she was right. Annie walked into the boarding house alone. The madam who ran the place looked her over with calculating eyes. Too young, honey. Come back in a year or 2. I am looking for Emma Crane. The madam's expression hardened. We do not have anyone by that name. Yes, you do. She was placed here 5 years ago by Virgil Kane. I do not know who that is. Annie pulled out money Caleb had given her. Then maybe this will help your memory. The madam looked at the bills, looked at Annie, made a decision. Room 7, top floor. Do not tell her I sent you. Annie climbed the stairs. Room 7 was at the end of a long hallway that smelled of cheap perfume and cheaper whiskey. She knocked, waited, knocked again. The woman who answered the door was 21 going on 50. Hollow cheeks, dead eyes, hair that might have been pretty once but now hung lank and lifeless. I am not working tonight, she said, starting to close the door. Emma Crane. The woman froze. That is not my name anymore. It was, 5 years ago, before Virgil Kane sold you. Emma's face went white, then red. Get out. I do not know what you're talking about. I am Annie Porter. Do you remember? You gave me bread. When I was 7, you were 16. Recognition flickered in those dead eyes. Little Annie, God, you were just a baby. I am not anymore. Emma opened the door wider, let Annie in. The room was small, a bed, a washstand, a window that looked out on nothing. How did you find me? Jesse Kane told us where you were. We need your help. Jesse! Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. That coward? He knew what his uncle was doing, and he did nothing. He knows. and he is helping us now. We have Virgil's ledger, proof of what he has done. But we need testimony. We need someone to stand up and tell the truth. And you want that someone to be me, you and 11 others, all the girls Virgil sold. Emma sat on the bed, put her head in her hands. I cannot. You do not understand. If I testify the madam here, she will throw me out. I have nowhere else to go, no money, no skills except the ones this place taught me. That is not true. You survived. That is a skill, the most important one. Survival is not enough. It is all we have sometimes. Annie knelt in front of her. Emma, my mother tried to stop him. He killed her for it. Caleb's wife tried to stop him. He killed her too. Jesse's aunt tried. Dead. How many more have to die before someone says enough? Emma looked at her. Really looked. Saw this fierce, broken girl who had somehow found the courage to fight back. And something shifted in her chest. Something she thought had died 5 years ago. I kept records, she said quietly. Every girl who came through this house, where they came from, who placed them. I have been tracking Virgil's network for 3 years. She pulled a ledger from beneath the mattress, her own book, her own accounting. 12 more girls, some as young as 11. I know where they are. I know who bought them. I have been waiting for someone to care enough to do something with this information. She handed the ledger to Annie. I will testify, on one condition. We get them all out, every single one. The door opened. A man stood in the doorway. 50, hard eyes. A badge on his coat that said, United States Marshal. Caleb appeared behind him, hands raised. He followed us. The marshal stepped into the room, looked at Emma, at Annie, at the 2 ledgers. My name is Roy Dalton, he said, and I have been investigating Virgil Kane for 6 months. Now, tell me everything. They talked through the night. Dalton was thorough, methodical. He took notes, asked questions, cross-referenced the 2 ledgers. By dawn, he had built a case that could bring down not just Virgil, but the entire network of men who enabled him. This is solid, he said. More than solid. This is enough to hang 20 men. Then arrest them, Annie said. I will, but there is a problem. Virgil knows we are coming. He has fortified the trading post, 6 armed men, and he has leverage. What leverage? 2 girls from the orphanage. He is holding them hostage, says he will kill them if we raid. Caleb felt ice in his veins. Then we do not raid, we trade. Trade what? Me. He wants me. I have the original ledger. I am the one who can connect him to Miriam's murder. I will surrender in exchange for the hostages. That is suicide, Dalton said. That is justice. Caleb looked at Annie. You take the ledgers to Denver. Make sure the truth gets out, no matter what happens to me. No. Annie's voice was steel. We go together, partners. Remember, Annie, this is not your fight. Yes, it is. It has always been my fight, and I am not leaving you. Dalton watched this exchange, saw the bond between them, father and daughter in everything but blood. He made a decision. Then we do it smart. We trade. But we do not trust Virgil to keep his word. We have backup. Federal deputies positioned around the trading post. When the exchange happens, when the hostages are clear, we take him. He will see the trap, Caleb said. Maybe, but he is desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. They planned through the morning. By noon, they were riding back to Silver Ridge. Annie, Caleb, Emma, Marshal Dalton, and 6 federal deputies. An army of justice, small but determined. As they rode, Emma moved her horse close to Annie's. Thank you, she said, for coming for me, for not forgetting. I could not forget. You were kind when kindness was rare. That was a lifetime ago. Then we get a new lifetime now, a better one. Emma smiled. It was fragile, uncertain, but it was real. They reached the outskirts of Silver Ridge as the sun began to set, painting the sky in blood and gold. Dalton sent his deputies to position around the town, to watch, to wait. Then he, Caleb, Annie, and Emma rode down the main street. Every eye in town watched them. Whispers followed. the mountain man, the girl who escaped, the federal marshal. And now Emma Crane returned from the dead. They stopped in front of the trading post. Virgil Kane stood on the balcony, 2 young girls beside him, 9 and 11, terrified. A gun pressed to the older girl's head. "I see you brought friend Stone," Virgil called out. "That was not the deal." "The deal is this," Caleb said. "I surrender. You let the girls go. Then the law sorts the rest." "The law?" Virgil laughed. "I am the law here. Judge Ridley is the law. You are nothing but a murderer and a thief." "I have the ledger, Virgil, the original, and I have witnesses. Emma Crane, Jesse Kane, 12 other girls you sold. Your empire is done." Virgil's face twisted. "Then I have nothing to lose." He cocked the gun. Annie screamed, and everything went to hell. The gunshot never came. Instead, a voice rang out across the square, strong, clear, impossible. "Stop this madness, Kane!" Every head turned. A man stood at the end of the street, tall, bearded, lean from hard living. He walked forward with the steady gait of someone who had traveled far and would not be turned back now. The setting sun was behind him, casting his face in shadow. But Annie knew. She would know that walk anywhere. "Papa?" The word came out as a whisper, then louder, then a scream. "Papa." Daniel Porter stepped into the light. The crowd erupted in gasps and shouts. Daniel Porter had died in the mine collapse. Everyone knew it. The whole town had mourned him. Judge Ridley himself had declared him legally dead and awarded guardianship of his daughter to her uncle, by marriage, Virgil Kane. But dead men did not walk through town squares at sunset. Virgil's face went white, then red. The gun in his hand trembled. "This is a trick, some kind of fraud. Daniel Porter is dead. I saw the body myself." "You saw a body," Daniel said, still walking forward. "Not mine. You collapsed that mine shaft with me in it. But I was deeper than you thought. Found a side tunnel. Crawled out 3 miles down the mountain. By the time I made it back to civilization, my wife was already buried, and my daughter was in your house." He stopped 20 feet from the balcony. "I went to the marshal, to the territorial governor, told them everything. But I had no proof. So I went into witness protection. Been living in Montana under a false name, working, waiting, gathering evidence. And now I am back." Annie could not breathe, could not think. Her father, alive. All this time she had thought herself alone in the world, thought the mine had taken him like it had taken so many others. But he had been fighting, had been planning, had been coming for her. Virgil's mask of control was cracking. "You have no authority here, Porter. This is a legal matter. I am this girl's legal guardian, appointed by Judge Ridley himself." "About that," Marshal Dalton said, spurring his horse forward. "Judge Amos Ridley is currently under arrest in his chambers. Federal charges, corruption, bribery, conspiracy to commit fraud. My deputies have been gathering evidence for 6 months. Thanks to Mr. Porter's testimony, we had probable cause to search his home this morning." Dalton held up a stack of papers. "Bank records showing payments from you to Ridley, letters detailing your arrangement, and a very interesting contract selling guardianship rights to various orphans for specific fees. Turns out the good judge has been running quite the side business." Dalton continued, his voice carrying across the square. "The custody hearing, originally scheduled for 3 days from now, has been postponed indefinitely. Federal charges supersede local jurisdiction. Judge Ridley no longer has authority over this case or any other." Caleb felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The deadline that had been chasing them through the mountains was gone. Erased by federal law. The crowd murmured, shifted. People who had supported Virgil because he was powerful, because he was connected, because defying him was dangerous, now saw the foundation of that power crumbling. "This is a conspiracy," Virgil snarled. "All of you, coming after me because I am successful, because I pulled myself up from nothing while you all stayed in the mud." "You pulled yourself up by stepping on children," Emma Crane said. She had been silent until now, standing beside Annie's horse, but her voice carried. "I was 16 when you sold me. Told me I was going to a good home, a teaching position. Instead, I ended up in a brothel in Leadville for 5 years. Gasps from the crowd. Women covered their mouths. Men looked away in shame. That is a lie, Virgil said, but his voice wavered. Is it? Emma pulled out her ledger, held it high. I kept records. Every girl who came through Madame Pearl's house, where they came from, who placed them. She could smell his sweat, his fear, his desperation. Everyone back, Virgil screamed. Back or she dies right here. The federal deputies raised their rifles. Dalton held up a hand. Wait. Caleb dismounted slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. Let her go, Virgil. This is done. You have lost. Killing her changes nothing. It gives me satisfaction. No, it gives you a noose. I am getting a noose anyway. Virgil's laugh was unhinged. You made sure of that. So what do I have to lose? He started backing toward the trading post, dragging Annie with him. She struggled, tried to break free. His arm tightened until she could barely breathe. Daniel took a step forward. That is my daughter. She was never yours. She has been mine since her mother died, since I killed that meddling woman and made it look like childbirth complications. The confession stunned the crowd into silence. Annie's mother had died when Annie was 7. Everyone said it was childbirth, a stillborn baby, a tragic loss. But Virgil had just admitted the truth. Murder, cold and calculated. You killed Sarah, Daniel's voice broke. You killed my wife. She was going to report me, just like Miriam Stone, just like Clara. They all thought they could stop me. They were wrong. Annie felt something shift inside her chest. The fear that had paralyzed her began to transform into rage, into clarity, into the memory of everything Caleb had taught her in their days in the wilderness. How to survive, how to fight, how to use an opponent's strength against them. Virgil was bigger, stronger, but he was also panicked, unbalanced, focused on Caleb and Daniel and the deputies, not on the girl in his arms, the girl he thought was broken, helpless, defeated. He was wrong. Annie stopped struggling against his hold, let her body go limp, dead weight. Virgil stumbled slightly, adjusting his grip to keep her upright. The gun barrel moved away from her head just an inch. Just enough. She drove her elbow into his ribs with every ounce of strength she had. Caleb had taught her where to hit. The soft spots. The places that would make a man's breath stop and his grip loosen. Virgil gasped. His arm loosened. Annie twisted, dropped, rolled away. The gun fired. But Annie was no longer in front of it. The bullet went wild, shattering a window in the trading post. Virgil tried to aim again, tried to track her movement. He never got the chance. Jesse Kane came from nowhere. He had been watching from the crowd. His splinted leg barely healed. But when Annie made her move, when Virgil fired, Jesse moved. He crashed into his uncle like a falling tree. The two men went down hard. The gun skittered across the dirt. They fought on the ground. Uncle and nephew, family torn apart by greed and lies and the terrible weight of choices made and not made. Jesse was younger, stronger. But Virgil fought with the desperation of a man with nothing left to lose. Caleb reached the gun first, kicked it away, covered both men with his rifle. Enough, he said. It is over. Virgil looked up at him from beneath Jesse's weight. Blood ran from his nose. His eye was already swelling, but his smile was vicious. You think this ends with me? There are 12 more men in Colorado doing what I did. Judges, sheriffs, businessmen. You cut off one head, the beast has many. Then we will cut them all off, Marshal Dalton said. He gestured to his deputies. Take him. They pulled Virgil to his feet, clamped irons around his wrists. He looked at Annie one last time. You were always meant to be merchandise, girl. That is all you will ever be. Annie stood, brushed dirt from her dress, looked him in the eye. My name is Annie Porter. I am 15 years old. I am the daughter of Daniel Porter and Sarah Porter. I survived you, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure no other girl has to. Virgil said nothing. What could he say? He had lost, completely, finally. As the deputies secured Virgil's irons, Deputy Owen Cartwright, who had ridden in quietly with the marshal's men, rushed up the trading post stairs. The two young hostages still huddled on the balcony, frozen in terror. Owen wrapped them both in his coat, speaking soft reassurances, and carried them down to where Emma Crane waited. She took them gently, leading them toward the church. They were shaking, but alive. Safe. Then they led Virgil away toward the makeshift jail. The crowd parted like water. Some faces showed satisfaction. Others showed shame. A few showed relief that the nightmare was finally ending. Daniel ran to Annie, dropped to his knees in front of her. "Baby girl, my baby girl." Annie fell into his arms and wept. Great racking sobs that had been building for 8 years, since the day her mother died, since the day Virgil told her that her father was dead too, since the day she stopped believing in rescue. But rescue had come, in so many forms. Caleb, who taught her to fight. Jesse, who chose right over family. Emma, who kept records when everyone else forgot. Her father, who never stopped searching. And herself. The girl who found her voice and her courage and her strength. Caleb watched father and daughter reunite, felt something warm and painful in his chest. This was what Miriam had died for. This moment, this justice, this chance for a child to have a future. He turned to walk away. "Wait." Annie pulled back from her father, ran to Caleb, threw her arms around him. "Thank you for everything." Caleb held her carefully, like she was precious, because she was. "You saved yourself, Annie. I just gave you the space to do it. You gave me more than that. You gave me a reason to fight." Daniel approached, extended his hand to Caleb. "I do not have words for what you did, protecting my daughter, risking your life. Any man would have done the same." "No, they would not. This whole town knew what Virgil was doing, and they did nothing. You are a better man than most." Caleb shook his hand, but his eyes went to the mountains in the distance, to the cabin that was probably destroyed by now, to the life of solitude that had been his refuge and his prison for 10 years. "What will you do now?" Daniel asked. "I do not know. I have not thought that far ahead." Annie took his hand, then took her father's hand, held them both. "Papa, I love you." "But Caleb saved me too. He is family. Can he be family with us?" Daniel looked at this mountain man, this broken, grieving stranger who had done what the whole town could not or would not, who had seen a child in danger and chosen to act, who had lost everything and still found something to give. "Our house needs rebuilding," Daniel said slowly. "I am not young anymore. Could use help. A partner, if you are interested." Caleb stared at him. "You want me to live with you? I want my daughter to have the best chance at life. And I think that includes both her fathers, the one who gave her life and the one who taught her how to live it." The offer hung in the air. Caleb looked at Annie, saw hope in her eyes. Real hope. The kind that came from believing in second chances, in new beginnings, in families built from choice instead of blood. "I would like that," he said quietly. "Very much." The trial happened 1 week later. A new judge came from Denver, a man named Abraham Collins, with a reputation for fairness and an absolute intolerance for corruption. He set up court in the church, the only building in Silver Ridge large enough to hold everyone who wanted to watch justice finally being served. Virgil Kane sat in chains at the defendant's table. His expensive lawyer had fled town the day Judge Ridley was arrested. Now he had a court-appointed attorney who looked like he wished he was anywhere else. Marshal Dalton presented the evidence, the ledgers, both of them, Virgil's original and Emma's meticulously kept copy. The records matched. 11 girls documented in Virgil's hand. 17 more in Emma's. Names, ages, prices, destinations. Then came the witnesses. Emma Crane testified first. She stood before the judge and the packed courtroom and told her story. Sold at 16, promised a teaching position. Delivered to a brothel. 5 years of horror. She did not cry, did not break. Just spoke the truth in a clear, steady voice. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Annie testified second. She told of her mother's murder, of watching Virgil poison Sarah Porter and bury her body, of 8 years living in fear, of the other girls who came and went, of the ledger she had seen, of the night she ran into a blizzard because death seemed kinder than one more day in that house. Her voice never wavered. Dr. Samuel Crane testified third. Sober for the first time in years, he confessed to falsifying death certificates, to covering up murders, to being complicit through his silence. He broke down on the stand, begged forgiveness, said he had been protecting himself instead of the children who needed him. The judge listened without expression. Jesse Kane testified fourth. The courtroom gasped when he limped to the stand on his splinted leg. He told of growing up in Virgil's house, of the girls he saw come and go, of his Aunt Clara's death that he now knew was murder, of the choice he finally made to stand with truth instead of family. When asked why he waited so long, Jesse looked directly at his uncle. Because I was a coward. Because I loved him despite what he was. Because I told myself it was not my business. But silence is complicity, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends. Daniel Porter testified fifth. He told of the mine collapse, of Virgil's attempt to murder him, of his wife's death that he now knew was not natural, of years spent gathering evidence while his daughter suffered. By the time he finished, half the courtroom was weeping. Caleb testified last. He spoke of Miriam, of her murder, of 10 years believing a lie, of finding Annie and recognizing the same evil that had taken his wife, of choosing to fight instead of hide. The judge took notes throughout. When the testimony ended, he called for a recess. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts: murder, conspiracy, human trafficking, fraud, child endangerment. The list went on. Judge Collins looked at Virgil Kane. "Do you have anything to say before sentencing?" Virgil stood. For a moment the old arrogance flickered in his eyes. "I regret nothing. I was an orphan, a slave in the mines. I clawed my way to power. Everything I did to survive, to thrive. You call it evil. I call it ambition." "I call it depravity," the judge said coldly. "Virgil Kane, you are sentenced to death by hanging, sentenced to be carried out 2 weeks from today. May God have mercy on your soul. This court has none." The gavel fell. Justice delayed, but not denied. The day of the execution, Annie chose not to watch. She and Caleb stood on a hill outside town. They could hear the distant sounds of the crowd, the reading of charges, the minister's prayer, the creak of the gallows, the sudden silence when the trapdoor fell. Annie closed her eyes, felt the wind on her face. "Is it wrong that I do not feel anything?" "No, you survived him. That is enough." "I thought I would feel relief or satisfaction, but I just feel empty." Caleb put his arm around her shoulders. "That will pass. Healing takes time." They stood there until the crowd began to disperse, until the spectacle was over and Virgil Kane was just a body being loaded into a pine box. Another man who chose power over humanity and paid the ultimate price. As they walked back to town, Annie spoke quietly. "The marshal said they arrested 4 more men. Judges and sheriffs in other towns. The whole network is collapsing." "Good. He said there are still 8 more they are looking for, men who did what Virgil did. They will find them. Dalton is thorough." "What about the girls, the ones still out there?" Caleb stopped walking, looked at her. "What are you thinking?" "I am thinking we find them. All of them. We bring them home." "Annie, that is dangerous work. These men will not go quietly." "I know, but who better to find them than someone who survived, someone who knows how they think, how they operate." She looked up at him with fierce determination. "You taught me to survive, to fight. Now I want to use that to help others. Will you help me?" Caleb saw Miriam in that moment, saw the same fire, the same refusal to accept injustice, the same stubborn belief that one person could make a difference. "Yes," he said, "we will help them, together." 6 months passed. Winter gave way to spring. Snow melted. Flowers bloomed. The world kept turning despite the darkness that had stained Silver Ridge for so long. The Porter house was rebuilt, larger than before, 3 bedrooms instead of 2. Caleb and Daniel worked side by side, raising walls and laying floors. They built in silence mostly, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that came from shared purpose and mutual respect. Annie attended school. Miss Sarah Mitchell, the new school teacher from Denver, taught reading and writing and history. Annie devoured knowledge like she had been starved for it, which in a way she had been. Emma Crane stayed in Silver Ridge. Dr. Crane had died of a heart attack 2 weeks after the trial. The guilt and the laudanum withdrawal together had been too much. But before he died, he signed over his house and savings to Emma. She turned the house into a shelter, a place for girls who had nowhere else to go, a place where they could heal. Jesse became sheriff, a real one, elected by the people instead of appointed by corrupt judges. He wore the badge with a gravity that came from understanding how easily power could corrupt. He was fair, firm, and absolutely unwilling to look the other way. Marshal Dalton came through town regularly. 8 more men had been arrested from Virgil's network. 4 others were still being hunted across the territories. The trafficking web was unraveling thread by thread. The trafficking network was broken. 47 children had been rescued and returned to families or placed in safe homes. It was not perfect. Some of the girls were too damaged to recover fully. Some of the families did not want them back. But it was something. It was justice trying to balance the scales. And then came Annie's 16th birthday. The celebration was held at the Porter house on a warm June evening. The whole town came, not out of obligation, out of genuine affection. Annie had become something of a hero, the girl who stood up to Virgil Kane, the girl who found her voice. Tables were set up outside, food covered every surface, music played, children ran through the yard laughing. It was the kind of celebration that felt like healing made manifest. Annie stood on the porch and watched it all. She wore a new dress, blue like her mother's eyes. Her hair was clean and braided. She looked healthy, happy, whole. Caleb approached with a small wrapped package. "Happy birthday." Annie opened it. Inside was a wooden bird, perfectly carved, every feather detailed. "You made this?" "It was Samuel's favorite. I used to carve them for him. Thought maybe you would like one." Annie held it carefully. This gift was more than wood. It was trust. It was Caleb sharing his past instead of hiding from it. It was family. "Thank you, Papa." The word slipped out naturally. She had been calling him that for months now. Caleb and Papa interchangeably. Daniel did not mind. He understood that children could have more than one father, that love was not diminished by being shared. "I have something for you, too," Daniel said, joining them. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a deed to the land where her mother was buried, where the old house had stood. "It is yours now, to do with as you wish." Annie stared at the paper. "I want to build something there. A school, maybe, or another shelter. Something that helps people." "Then that is what we will build," Caleb said. The 3 of them stood together. A family forged from tragedy and choice. Not perfect. Still healing, but together. Emma approached with 6 other young women, girls who had been rescued from the network, girls who were learning to live again. "Annie, we wanted to say something." They gathered in front of the porch. Emma spoke for all of them. "You saved us, not just by testifying, but by showing us that survival is possible, that we are not defined by what was done to us. We wanted to thank you." One of the younger girls, barely 12, stepped forward. "You are my hero." Annie felt tears on her face. "I am not a hero. I just refuse to give up." "That is what makes you a hero," Emma said softly. The party continued into the night. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit. Someone started singing. Others joined. The music rose into the summer air, carrying hope and healing and the promise of better days. Annie found herself sitting between Caleb and her father as the stars came out. 3 generations of survival. 3 people who had lost everything and found each other. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked. "I am thinking about Mama, about how she tried to stop Virgil, how she died for it. And I am thinking that maybe she would be proud, that her death was not meaningless, that it led to all of this." Caleb took her hand. She would be proud. So would Miriam. They would be proud of all of us. Annie looked around at the celebration, at Emma teaching one of the younger girls to dance, at Jessie talking seriously with Marshal Dalton about leads on the remaining traffickers, at the townspeople who had finally found the courage to stand against corruption. This was what justice looked like, not perfect, not clean, but real, earned through sacrifice and courage and the refusal to accept evil as inevitable. "I want to do more," Annie said, "finding the girls, bringing them home. I want to make that my life's work." Daniel tensed. "That is dangerous, baby girl." "I know, but who better I know how they think, how they operate, and I have you both to help me." Caleb and Daniel exchanged a look over her head, a whole conversation in that glance, the fear of losing her, the pride in her courage, the knowledge that holding her back would break something essential in her spirit. "Then we do it together," Caleb said finally, "but we do it smart. We work with Dalton. We do not take unnecessary risks. And we remember that your life matters too. You are not required to save everyone. But I can try. Yes, you can try, and we will help you." The celebration wound down near midnight. People drifted home. Families gathered children. Couples walked hand in hand through the warm night. The Porter house slowly emptied until only the 3 of them remained. They sat on the porch in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance through the darkness, listening to the night sounds of a town at peace. "I have been thinking," Daniel said carefully, "about adopting you legal-like. So your last name is Porter on all the documents, so there is no question about family." "I would like that," Annie said. "But I want Caleb to adopt me too. That is not how it works legally. You can only have one legal guardian. Then we make it work differently. We write our own papers. We all sign them. We all agree that we are family, the 3 of us, equal, together." "And my name," Annie asked quietly, "what will my name be?" Daniel and Caleb exchanged a glance. "Porter," Daniel said, "your mother's name, your birthright." "And Stone," Caleb added softly, "if you want it. Not to replace Porter, but to carry with it. Porter Stone, both of us, always." Annie smiled through her tears. "Porter Stone, I like that." Caleb felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he had been carrying for 10 years, the belief that he did not deserve family, that he had lost his chance, that guilt and sorrow were all he would ever know. "I would be honored," he said. They sat there until dawn began to paint the eastern sky. 3 people who had been broken by loss and violence. 3 people who had chosen to heal together instead of suffer alone. 3 people who proved that family was not about blood. It was about choice, about showing up, about staying when things got hard. As the sun rose, Annie stood, stretched, looked at the 2 men who had become her fathers. "You know what the best part of today is?" she asked. "What, I am not afraid anymore. For the first time in 8 years, I woke up without fear. And that is because of you both. You taught me I was worth saving, worth protecting, worth loving." She kissed them each on the cheek. "Thank you for giving me my life back." Caleb watched her walk inside, heard her humming, actually humming. A year ago she could not speak, could not imagine a future, could not believe in anything except pain. Now she was planning to save other girls, to build schools and shelters, to fight the darkness that had nearly consumed her. "We did good," Daniel said quietly. "She did good. We just gave her the space to find herself." Is that not what fathers do? Caleb thought about Samuel, about all the things he never got to teach his son, about the guilt he had carried for failing to protect him. But maybe, just maybe, he could honor Samuel's memory by being the father Annie needed, by protecting her, by giving her the tools to protect herself. "Yes," he said, "I suppose it is." 10 years later, a newspaper ran a story. The headline read, "Local Woman Rescues 89th Child from Trafficking Ring." The article detailed how Annie Porter Stone, now 26, had spent a decade working with federal marshals to dismantle human trafficking networks across the Western Territories. How she had personally rescued 89 children. How she had opened 3 shelters and 2 schools. How she had become a voice for the voiceless. The article included a photograph. Annie stood between 2 older men, Caleb Stone, 53, former mountain man turned children's advocate, and Daniel Porter, 55, carpenter and shelter administrator. All 3 were smiling. The caption read, "A family built on justice." But the article got one thing wrong. It said Annie was extraordinary, that she was special, that not everyone could do what she did. Annie disagreed. She believed that everyone had the capacity for courage, that everyone could choose to fight instead of hide, that the only difference between a hero and a bystander was the decision to act. She had made that decision in a blizzard 8 years ago, when she ran toward death rather than spend another night in hell, when she chose to speak even when her voice was broken, when she chose to fight even when fighting seemed hopeless, and she had been making that decision every day since, not because she was extraordinary, because she refused to let evil have the last word, because she remembered the girls who came before her, the ones who did not survive, the ones whose names filled ledgers and disappeared into unmarked graves, because she knew that silence was complicity, and action was justice, and because 2 men had taught her the most important lesson of all. You do not have to be perfect to make a difference. You just have to care enough to try. As the sun set on another day in Silver Ridge, Annie sat on her porch with her fathers and watched the mountains turn gold. Somewhere out there, another child was suffering. Another predator was hunting. Another injustice was unfolding. Tomorrow she would fight it. But tonight she was home, safe, loved, and that after everything was miracle enough, the end.